African diamonds, African uranium, and lithium, all this wealth around me. I'm going to use my brain to transform all this wealth around me into opportunity for my people. And to claim the 21st century as truly African century. I thank you. Thank you very much. Butcher of Abuja. The butcher of Abuja. Then they say that one evening, Nigerians went to sleep hoping that tomorrow that they would wake up again to one of those bloody days. But they had prayed. But in the morning when they woke up, they found that God had actually gone to Asorok. Asorok is the state house in Ghana. And he invited Mr. Abacha to go and be his guest permanently in heaven. So they say God is a Nigerian. It had the prayers of the Nigerian people. Okay. I'm also accompanied here by my daughter, Winnie, who is, I don't know where she is.
She stepped out.
Huh?
She stepped out.
Somewhere, I'm told that she is a millennium. Millennial, she's not a Gen Z. But let me begin now by expressing my deep appreciation of the Pan-African Youth Convention and our hosts, Youth Bridge Kenya, for the invitation to this great event. I find meetings like this very inspiring as they provide perfect opportunities to meet with young people and to hear directly from them. I see this as an opportunity to get new ideas. More importantly, meetings like this indicate the extent to which young people are rising up to carve their space and summon us to their event so that we can share ideas and the possibilities of Africa's tomorrow. It used to be the other way around. In Africa's fast-fading old days, it was us, not the youth, the parents, to summon the children. But roles are reversing, and we have no option but to comply. There could not be a better time for Africa, and Kenya in particular, to be talking about the youth and their views and the role in our society. Let me state from the outset that I have always been and I remain a firm believer in the potential and power of the young people to shape the future of Africa. I know firsthand that many of the great developments that have been achieved in Africa, including here in Kenya, were pushed and forced by the young people. Without fear of doubt or doubts, I can state categorically that I am honored to have been a key player in the youth movements that transformed Kenya into a democracy and open society of sorts in my years of youth. By age, Africa is an extremely young continent. Today, around 60% of Africa's 1.5 billion people is younger than 25 years. More than a third of Africa's total population is between 15 and 34 years old. It is therefore obvious that the solution to some of the greatest challenges facing our continent lies with the youth. The youth live with those challenges, and they are expected to resolve those challenges as we move forward. So I've said that the youth is a potential. If you empower them, if you don't empower them, they become delinquents, drug addicts, thieves, and criminals. But if you empower them with the knowledge, access to knowledge, and access to opportunities, then they become a very powerful force for wealth creation in a society. But the youth will not be able to provide solutions to our problems unless they are empowered. As a leader, I remain deeply committed to overseeing a continent that provides opportunities for young people. I'm committed to ensuring that the youth are change agents today as they make their way to being leaders of the continent. To this end, I believe we have the responsibility of ensuring that our boys and girls get equal access to education, that we give them skills to strengthen their leadership in every aspect of society, including business, academia, civil society, and politics. I believe that Africa has the responsibility of providing our young entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs with the capital and networks to grow businesses and pursue innovations. In other words, we have a responsibility to help the youth help themselves and our continent. We are currently in the era of pursuing Africa's renaissance. The term renaissance itself evokes a rebirth, a renewal of spirit, and a resurgence of greatness. This is precisely what Africa needs in the 21st century. No segment of any population represents the rebirth and renewal of spirit better than the youth. In their hands lies the power to transform challenges into opportunities, to harness innovation for sustainable development, and to drive social change that benefits all Africans. The African Renaissance we envisage is not merely an economic or political ambition. It must also be a cultural and intellectual awakening. It calls for a reclamation of our heritage, a celebration of our diversity, and a commitment to unity amidst our differences. As leaders and stakeholders, we have a responsibility and duty to listen to the voices of our youth, empower their aspirations, and provide them with the platform they need to contribute meaningfully to our shared future. Their energy, idealism, and determination are the driving forces behind the resurgence of Africa on the global stage. We have a duty to harness this potential, nurture their talent, and jointly embark on a journey towards an African Renaissance that leaves no one behind. But our young people must not just rely on their adults to help them deliver Africa's future for their dreams. Our young people must learn to work together, learn from one another, avoid the divisions of the past, and be the change they wish to see on the continent. As young people, there's a very solid foundation and tradition to build on. The foundation and tradition are the joint efforts and sacrifices of older generations of Africa's founders who led our continent to independence, which did not come easy. We got where we are today by working together and imagining a future. They may have fell short of their own aspirations, but they did lay a firm foundation on which you can build new plans for a perfect continent. You have come of age in an era of breathtaking change. You have come of age in the age of technology and an interconnected world. Today, the world has become a global village. When I was living in Europe, a letter, it's called surface mail, would take 3 weeks to arrive. Then came the email, the airmail. It would take 1 week to arrive. Then came the express airmail, 3 days. And you are very surprised, you are very happy that it has only 3 days. Then came the telex. And then came the fax machine. And then came the mobile phone, the analog. And then now here, today we are. The world has become truly a global village, just within a very short period of time, in my lifetime. So these are fundamental changes that have taken place. I encourage you to resist attempts to isolate the continent in a globalizing world. I encourage you to ignore the notion that the world is controlled by forces that you can't overcome and control. I encourage you to immerse yourself into this world with a view to taking complete control of it for the sake of Africa. You must take a longer and more optimistic view of the world, guided by our resilience as African people. Africa is the richest continent on the surface of the earth in terms of resources. Yet it is a paradox that the richest continent is also the poorest in terms of the living conditions of its people. But this is a situation that we can change. It is possible to change this situation. I have had an opportunity to work for the continent as the African Union High Representative on Infrastructure Development. It gave me a first-hand opportunity to understand our continent, its peoples, and its challenges. There we were dealing with major infrastructural projects which have been conceived by the African Union. The highways, trans-African highways, Cape Town to Cairo. That project was coined by a white South African, Sir Cecil Rhodes, over 100 years ago, to build a highway from the Cape Town to Cairo. Up to today, that highway has not been built. There are still missing links to it. Another one is from Tripoli to the Cape, which is also there. There are several missing links which has not been completed. Another one is from Dakar in Senegal through the Sahel to Djibouti. Another one is Dakar to Lagos, Lagos to Mombasa, which has also not been constructed. Then you have got Trans-African high-speed railway network. One from Beira in Mozambique all the way to Walvis Bay in Namibia. The other one is from Lagos along the coast to Cotonou in Benin, to Lomé in Togo, Accra in Ghana, to Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, all along to Guinea, to Mauritania, to Morocco, to Algeria, to Libya, Tunisia, up to Cairo. And then another one, which we had coined from here, LAPSET, Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia Transport Corridor. But then as AU, we modified. To go Lamu, one branch will go to Ethiopia, the other one to Juba, and then to Bangui in Central African Republic, then to Cameroon port of Kribi, to create a land bridge that links the Atlantic Ocean to Indian Ocean, and then opening up the interior, the landlocked countries in Africa for trade. The labor goods coming from the east, from Japan, from China, from India, from the Middle East, to come to Lamu, and then by train transported across to those countries like South Sudan, North Sudan, Chad, Niger, Congo-Brazzaville, up to Nigeria. Because the African Union had come up with African Free Trade area agreement. But how does Africa trade with itself without a proper infrastructure? Here you're in Kenya. Between Kenya and a country called Central African Republic, there's only South Sudan. But how do you get your goods to Central African Republic? How do you get your tea from Kenya to Central African Republic where they don't grow tea? You have to find a ship that will go down Cape Coast and go up along the coast, Namibia, Angola, up to Cameroon, and then pick it from Douala by road to Bangui in Central African Republic. The French and the British are much faster there than you. That's why in Bangui, in Central African Republic, they drink Kenyan tea, Christian as English breakfast tea. But if you do the proper infrastructure, you can reach there. Only South Sudan is between you and Central African Republic. There are several others. We are dealing with high speed fiber optic network that will link several African capitals so that communication is easier. We are dealing with open skies, how to make the air transport easier across the continent of Africa. At the moment, air transport is so expensive in our continent. Why? Because they don't have a proper air control system. Each country has got its own individual air traffic control system. So if you want to fly from here, you have to pay overflight fees to several countries you're going to go across. From here to Lagos, so many countries. Yeah, the other day I was going for a funeral of a president of Namibia, and we chartered an aircraft to drive Nairobi to Windhoek, Namibia. You have to get clearance from Tanzania, from DRC, from Zambia, from Botswana, and Namibia. We were spending 3 hours on the ground at Wilson Airport because we did not have clearance to fly over Tanzania. At that time, I was stranded in Dar es Salaam trying to get to Niamey in Niger. Yeah, because you have to get clearance over Uganda, DRC, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, Niger. You don't need those kind of things in Europe. Because they have got one standardized air control system that gives you clearance and you can fly over all those countries in Europe. That is cheaper. These are some of the things which can be changed, and we are dealing with this. Then we are dealing with energy. Energy is so expensive on the continent of Africa. You go to a place like the Gambia, it costs you 38 US cents per unit. In some other places in Europe, it is 2 cents. How can you compete with those who are producing energy at 2 cents, yet you here are buying it at 38 cents? Yet Africa has got abundance of energy source, particularly what you can call green energy. The solar, the wind, the waves, the geothermal, the hydro, all available in abundance on our continent. How do we make use of it to reduce the cost of energy so that it's accessible to most of our people who live in rural areas and be able to create industries in rural areas? Those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with. We're dealing with other issues of trade, to remove non-tariff barriers that are there, being put artificially by states that make it more difficult to trade across the continent. These are some of the challenges that we have on our continent. But Africa has a future because we have a youth, and we need to reap the youth dividends. Today, African youth are dying on the ships, trying to reach greener pastures in Europe. The people are escaping poverty from Africa. We must reverse this trend by creating more opportunities in the continent, so that our people do not have to flee from their own homes looking for opportunities which are not available here. Make those opportunities available on the continent of Africa. On the issue of climate change, Africa is a victim. Africa is a victim of actions which have been taken elsewhere. The emitters of carbon monoxide that is creating global warming are elsewhere. Africa is a victim. But Africa, first, we cannot just stand here and say we're a victim and we're doing nothing. We need to do something ourselves. But secondly, we must now also negotiate much more firmly with these offenders so we get proper compensation for actions which have been taken outside our continent. You can see today Africa is suffering from floods and droughts, alternating. Floods this year, recently floods in Kenya, drought in southern Africa. When it becomes floods there, it's drought here in Kenya. Africa is suffering. And there's also desertification, which is coming. The Sahara is spreading south. How do you stem this tide? We need to stem this tide. And these are the reasons why I've offered myself to go and become the chair of African Union. That we can, I think that I can be like a catalyst to create a new thinking within the African Union so that we can be able to exploit the potential that we have really in this continent and really realize the dreams of the founding fathers of our continent. Dreams of Osagie Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Ahmed Sékou Touré, Modibo Keïta, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, Nelson Mandela, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Ahmed Ben Bella. I can mention them. These were people who had foresight, who wanted Africa to be united Kwame Nkrumah said, Africa continental government now, today, 61 years later, we are still where they started. We have nationalities around, but we need to create that African personality, that are real African. Africa has been exploited over the years. Relics of exploitation are there. But we should not sit and continue to be just lamenting. But we cannot also forget the injustices which have been made against our people in the past. And therefore, the day of reparation, the subject of reparation cannot be wished away. It must remain a subject on the table as we move forward. But let us also create our own wealth in this continent. So I conclude by telling you the story of the African lion. There are several lions on the continent. If you go to Cameroon, they call it the indomitable lions. You go to Senegal, they call them the lions of Teranga. You go to Morocco, they call them Atlas lions. And you come to Kenya here, the Simba, ya Kenya. So this is the African lion. The African lion is sending a message to the Asian tiger. And the message is clear. That you, Asian tiger, you have danced on the stage for far too long alone, unchallenged. The European bear retreated many years into the ice of the North Pole. The American panther is also on the retreat. So you've been there alone. I, as African lion, have been asleep in the jungles of the Congo, bounded by the peaks, Mount Kilimanjaro to the east, and Atlas Mountains to the west.